Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It's 8:07. It's our fourth hour here, and we're all fired up to finish strong. If you missed any of our first 3 hours of Radio Excellence, please download the podcast. You should subscribe. Everywhere you like your podcast, you'll find us. It's O'Connor and Company. Coming up in 30 minutes, Montana Attorney General Austin Knudsen, he, along with 22 other attorneys general, are trying to implore the EPA to stop funding climate lawfare being financed with your tax dollars. We'll get to the bottom of that coming up in 30 minutes. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Yesterday and earlier today, we were discussing this very curious announcement from President Trump that he wants to increase by almost threefold the number of Chinese nationals who can attend our colleges. These, of course, are people who come to America with the blessing and encouragement of the Chinese Communist Party in Beijing. And we thought to ourselves, well, that doesn't seem like a smart thing to do. That doesn't make any sense, and that doesn't seem like America first. We got to get Gordon Chang to explain this to us. Gordon Chang, author of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America, is now with us. Good morning, Gordon.
Good morning, Larry and Julie, and thank you so much.
We've had conversations in the past, and I have read your book, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Beijing's intent on being involved in our college campuses through funding projects and think tanks and all of that activities, as well as getting students connected to the communist government in our classrooms and participating in our higher education, that's all sort of part of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is. And what we see is that where there are any concentration of Chinese students, you have either Chinese consular officials or Ministry of State Security agents monitoring, coercing, and surveilling students. So if we're going to increase the number of students from 277,000 to 600,000, then we're going to have more MSS agents in our country because China is not going to allow them to come here unless they monitor them. And that means we're going to have more agents and operatives from Beijing on American soil.
Okay. Surely President Trump knows that. I know he does because his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, in May signaled that he wanted to ramp back and start deporting and revoking visas for students tied to the Communist Party and tied to the Chinese government. So what gives here, Gordon?
You'd have to ask President Trump that. I suspect that he's thinking about trade, that there is, of course, a big trade effect from having all of these students in our country because we're providing services. Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, says that if we don't do this, the bottom 15% of American institutions will go bankrupt. But, on the other side of it, there's two things. As you say, this is not America first. America first is educating Americans. And every space that goes to a Chinese student, or a student from any other country for that matter, is one fewer space for Americans. But also we know that the Communist Party, as I mentioned, coerces Chinese students. And sometimes they coerce them to commit acts of espionage against our country. And the amount of data theft from Chinese students is substantial. Nobody really knows what percentage of Chinese students commit acts of espionage, but I've seen one estimate that says 13%. And to me, that sounds credible. But whatever it is unacceptable.
You know, it's one thing for President Trump to say, okay, we're going to have 600,000 students in this country, but he didn't just say that. He made it seem like everything is great with China. He said that. He said, I have a great relationship with President Xi. We have a great relationship with China. Everything's going to be great with China. It was a very rosy picture he painted. And then to hear you say all of this espionage that happens and agents here with these students, I mean, it is not a rosy picture. Can you explain again, is this some sort of diplomatic effort to make it sound better than it actually is?
I guess it is. But as you point out, our relations with China are certainly worse than they have ever been. We'd have to go back to the Eisenhower years to find a time when it was more disadvantageous to the United States. We have 1.2 million American COVID deaths. China deliberately spread the disease beyond its borders once it broke out into the Chinese population. We can argue about the numbers, but any number above zero is unacceptable. We have tens of thousands of deaths from fentanyl each year, and we know that the Communist Party is behind and supports these fentanyl sales into the United States. So these are acts of murder, Julie. We can go on and on, but our relationships with China right now should not be portrayed as rosy. And although I know President Trump wants to portray this as good, but his relationship with Xi Jinping is not the way he describes it.
We're speaking with Gordon Chang. He's our favorite expert on all things Pacific Rim and certainly the government of China, and he's also the author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. Follow him on X, Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, who is sort of driving China policy right now in the Trump administration? Is it Commerce Secretary Lutnick? Gordon? Did we lose you?
Must have.
Oh, it seems like we lost Gordon.
Lost him.
All right. Shoot.
The Chinese.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I was trying to figure out exactly who's driving this, because if it is Commerce Secretary Lutnick, I mean, by definition, he's the Commerce Secretary. So he views everything having to do with our relationship with China through the lens of commerce and sales and trade and the economy. And I understand that that's a big deal. And I know we've got major corporations who are manufacturing there, and I know that there's a lot of money in retail here. I get that. But that's not the entirety of our relationship with them. In fact, it's kind of secondary on the grand scheme of things, considering the way they've increased their military spending. Any expert you talk to about China's military spending will tell you that they ramp up, and everything they've invested in is meant to wage war against the United States of America.
And allies.
And our allies.
And her allies. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Taiwan is in... there's a lot of worry about Taiwan right now. And will it fall to China, and when will the attacks come? I mean, I think Trump's position of aggressiveness is certainly better than Biden's, but China is on the warpath for sure.
Let's, if we could, Jeff, no worries. We lost Gordon Chang. That's fine. We don't need to worry about trying to connect with him again. Let's go to Cut 27. This is the president yesterday at the cabinet meeting when concerns were raised. And, people have been, like we have been saying, hey, maybe this isn't the best idea. Because, again, I want to remind everybody, as of now, I believe it's like 280,000 Chinese students in this country. Mm-hmm. And, again, you don't leave China unless you have permission from the government. So by definition... They are all here at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party.
And we're going to triple that?
I'm not saying all of them are spies. I'm not saying that. I'm not painting with a broad brush.
I'll go ahead and say
it. And so let's just listen to the president yesterday at the cabinet meeting at pushing back on the idea that maybe this isn't a good idea to increase this to 600,000.
We're getting along very well with China. And I'm getting along very well with President Xi. I think it's very insulting to say students can't come here, because they'll go out, they'll start building schools, and they'll be able to survive it. But I like that their students come here. I like that other countries' students come here. And you know what would happen if they didn't? Our college system would go to hell very quickly.
All right. We've got Gordon back. I have one more question for Gordon. We'll ask him in a moment, and then we'll also talk about the latest D.C. crime issues here as Judge Jeanine Pirro, your U.S. attorney, made an announcement. We'll play that for you in a moment.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
And we've reconnected with Gordon. I'm sorry, Gordon, I had one more question for you. It seems like Commerce Secretary Lutnick is driving our policies with China, and I get that. Obviously, trade is a big deal, and, retail cheap T-shirts at Walmart is a big deal. But, I mean, shouldn't everything be shot through a military, strategic defense sort of lens? Who is sort of running the China policy?
Larry, I think it's President Trump, because President Trump runs all of his policies. And, when he has great ideas. And he doesn't have this interagency process. He just says what he thinks, and almost all the time, he says great things and he implements them. But unfortunately, every once in a while, we need to have someone stand up and say, Mr. President, this is wrong. You should not do this. And unfortunately, nobody in the administration, as far as I can tell, does that. So that's why we get statements about 600,000 Chinese students, which has outraged American people and outraged MAGA world. This is just wrong.
Yep. So you said it well. You want to jump in real fast?
And really quickly, and Gordon, it's not just wrong. I mean, it's primarily wrong on a national security level, but also, I'm the mom of 3 boys that are just about to launch into this. We're going through the college stuff right now. They're still in high school, but we're going through and I would like those 600,000 spots in American colleges to be reserved for Americans. That is another thing that I think angers and that's exactly what you said, that it's angering MAGA, it's angering America First people. But this is just a kick in the gut to parents who are already struggling with sort of the problems with higher education, and then you have this. It's truly unfair.
Yeah, it is.
It is unfair. And it's not good for our future, because our future is going to be determined by Americans. And if we can't educate Americans, then we're in trouble, because what we're doing is we're educating those from a regime that hates us. We have to be very clear about what the Communist Party says about us when they think we're not listening. But clearly they they call us an enemy. And we got to take that into account. We should not be training the cadre of our enemy.
I agree. They're going to get their STEM degrees, their science degrees, their mechanical engineering degrees. They're going to go back to China and design a weapons system for a nuclear submarine that'll attack our nation and put our military in harm's way. I don't get it. Gordon Chang, we got to leave it there. It's always great to talk with you. Our best to Lydia.
Thanks, Larry, and thanks, Julie.
Thanks.
All right, it's 8:19 now. Let's turn to an update on the crime situation in D.C. I'm sorry to say that it turns out there has been a homicide. So we made it 12 days, which, by the way, is a stunning achievement in the summer. Judge Jeanine Pirro, your U.S. attorney, made another announcement yesterday on social media. Let's take a listen to that.
It is Tuesday, August 26th. It is Judge Jeanine. Here I am in the District of Columbia. And last night, 86 arrests on the surge. 4 guns were seized, bringing us up to 1,094 arrests since the surge started, and 115 guns that have been taken off the street and not capable of being used in further crimes. And by the way, an additional pearl here, not a single carjacking in over a week. So we continue to fight the fight to make sure that people in D.C. are safe. And I got to tell you something. I was watching the news this morning, and someone was complaining that Americans really are not concerned about carjacking. I think that they need to reconnect with the Americans who are living in D.C. and all around the country who don't want to be carjacked, and forget the nonsense of making believe that this isn't a real problem. It is a real problem, and President Trump is cleaning it up.
All right, and by the way, the person who was saying people don't care about carjacking, that was a Democrat, of course, trying to distract. But I mentioned this the other day, and let me just be clear. One of the things that's going to happen here is that crime is down across the board, every stat here in Washington, D.C. Criminals aren't stupid. Wes Moore in Maryland has said, oh, yeah, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to do anything like that. We don't want any of that enforcement of the law here. So now crime is going to increase right across the Anacostia in Prince George's County. And here's a local ABC 7 report yesterday. Listen to what happened in Prince George's County.
MLK and Sheriff. MLK and Sheriff, vehicles on fire. I copy.
That urgent call came in from dispatchers around 3:45 p.m. Sources tell 7 News juveniles, 4 of them, stole this brown car and were heading into D.C. when they allegedly ran a red light and hit the mother and child inside this silver car. The baby, just 2 years old, according to sources, survived, while the mom didn't make it.
There you go. So that carjacking didn't take place in D.C. It took place in Prince George's County because Wes Moore wants to run for president, and he wants to grandstand and thump his chest and say, I'm not like Trump. I'm not an authoritarian. Yeah, well, tell the children who now don't have a mother. Where's the compassion?
Yeah.
If we have time a little later, I want to play with. It was a really dramatic moment yesterday where a reporter thanked President Trump at the cabinet meeting for cracking down on crime because she had been attacked. She had been pistol whipped outside her apartment. She was robbed. She was a reporter in the White House pool, and she was a victim of these crimes. It's a great, dramatic, emotional moment. We'll try to get to you in a moment. First, though, it's 8:23.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
8:37 now. It's O'Connor and Company. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Thanks for tuning in here in your nation's capital. Coming up in 30 minutes, it's going to be the Chris Plant Show featuring Chris Plant. We'll talk to him coming up. But first, look at this. It's an attorney general, Julie. I have to be on my best behavior if I ever want to go to Montana and not get arrested. He's Austin Knudsen. He is the attorney general of the great state of Montana. He joins us now. Thank you for being here, Mr. Attorney General.
No, thanks for having me.
Well, you're leading a coalition of 23 state attorneys general here asking Administrator of the EPA, Lee Zeldin, to stop funding a thing called Environmental Law Institute. Well, an Environmental Law Institute, that sounds like a completely benign and trustworthy organization just trying to, advance environmental law. Why? What have you got against them? It sounds so altruistic.
It does. Unfortunately, they spend a whole bunch of taxpayer money running around the country, putting on trainings, quote unquote, for about 2,000 judges around the country, basically trying to indoctrinate judges and sway them to rule in their favor when it comes to climate change cases. We view this as no different than consumer protection on a lot of other issues that state attorneys general have to follow up on, and this is deceptive practices coming out of one organization, and they're using your taxpayer dollars to do it.
Yeah, that's the biggest outrage, is that they're picking my pocket to do this. But it sounds like they're getting judges in the room ahead of any sort of lawsuits and swaying them under the guise of education to already to basically predetermine that what they want for climate justice, so-called, is rooted in law, and that the judges are already going to be in the tank for them.
Well, that's exactly right. This would be like letting a plaintiff who's bringing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against you, letting them come have an educational forum with your judge before the case even starts. And that really is the problem here. They're starting with the guys that the science is settled, that they know best, that these judges should, of course, listen to them and to their side of the argument. It's just a matter of fairness and equity, but it really is a matter of consumer protection. This is your taxpayer dollars being used by these groups to lobby these judges.
So tell us what the reaction has been to this letter.
Well, it's been quick. We've had a lot of members of the EPA reach out actually and ask for the letter, want to see it. Now, look, I want to be fair to Administrator Zeldin. He's done a very, very good job. They've cut billions of dollars already. They've canceled grants to a lot of things like this. We just want to make sure that this one is on their radar, that they're aware that this is happening. I have every hope and every belief that Administrator Zeldin's going to do the right thing here. This is mostly just about making sure this is on his radar.
Are these training seminars, are they sort of like junkets as well? I mean, they're always at a very cush place and, comfy, cozy and well-funded, and the judges get to get wined and dined? Is that sort of thing happening?
We're still doing some investigation on that. I have to be honest, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
What concerns me is, by their own numbers, they claim to have put on more than 50 of these trainings and trained more than 2,000 judges. Now, is that all federal judges? Well, there's not 2,000 federal judges. That means there's got to be state district judges. Is that state Supreme Court justices? We don't know all the answers to that yet. These are things we're trying to find out.
It seems like the EPA shouldn't be in this business anyway. Why are they giving grants to a group called the Environmental Law Institute, where they basically end up filing lawsuits or trying to utilize all of their money to then influence the policy of the EPA through lawfare or through other means? It's like, listen, I'm not naive. I know these groups exist, but why in the hell should the EPA themselves be funding them? That sounds a little bit like a circular sort of money flow there.
Well, you're absolutely asking the right question. Why is EPA doing this? Well, we know why. I mean, this was under the Biden administration. The Biden administration knew that they could not get their radical anti-traditional fuels agenda through the Congress. And that really is what chafes me here. This is a discussion that belongs in the halls of Congress, not pushed out on our judiciary, whose job it is to interpret these laws and make sure they're constitutional.
And so what ends up happening here,
misguided by
what ends up happening, Attorney General Knudsen, and you can tell me, but I think what happened, we're angry enough that these unelected bureaucrats at the EPA over the years have sort of taken something like the Clean Air Act and turned it into something that, outlaws SUVs, right? And nobody ever voted for that. But this is even worse. It's not even the bureaucrats who are on the public dime. It's done through these judges that end up reaching settlements with local jurisdictions or settlements with corporations just to avoid a big lawsuit. And suddenly all of the climate change green energy agenda gets implemented without a single vote.
This is absolutely lawfare in one of its most pernicious forms that we've seen. Absolutely. I mean, again, these are groups who have been unsuccessful in convincing the Congress and the U.S. Senate that this policy should be implemented. So what do? They run to their buddies in black robes and try to get this implemented at the judicial level, which is absolutely inappropriate.
Yeah. You mentioned that it belongs in Congress. Have there been hearings, or will there be hearings? Have you heard of any, or is there a champion up on the Hill who's working on this?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think this would be appropriate for a congressional hearing. I think it would make for a good entertaining hearing. But look, we just fired this letter off yesterday. I'm not aware of anybody in Congress willing to pick this up yet. I'm hoping that changes.
All right. Well, I got to think Lee Zeldin is open to this letter as well, and we'll be hearing from the administrator of the EPA. He's been fantastic on these issues. Final question. Do you have a lot of Cracker Barrels there in Montana?
We have
Taylor
a
Swift.
handful. I wouldn't say a lot, but we certainly have a handful.
All right. So the Montanans must be very happy that we're going to keep Uncle Herschel in the logo.
Look, I like a Cracker Barrel. I think they should keep the pegboard game just the way it was, and the decor on the walls just the way it was. But that's just me.
Are you excited about Taylor Swift?
Yes.
Who?
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. He's immediately our favorite Attorney General in America.
Well done.
Thank you, Austin Knudsen. I appreciate you joining us. It's 8:44.
WMAL's Vince Colonnese, weekdays at noon on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
All right, following up here, as we promised on the D.C. crime issue, a dramatic moment in the cabinet meeting yesterday. I'm going to call it a boardroom meeting because it looked like The Apprentice, where a member of the media, Iris Tao, spoke up about how she was victimized by crime and wanted to thank the president. Let's start with cut 30.
My name is Iris Tao. I'm a White House correspondent for MTV, the sister media of the Epoch Times. So more than 2 years ago, it was a Saturday morning in broad daylight. I was on my way to work, and a young man with a black ski mask pointed a gun at my face and threatened me to hand over my phone, my wallet, my laptop, and everything else. And when I refused, he used the butt of his handgun to strike me across the face, in the cheek, or what some people call pistol whip me, before running away. And that has deeply traumatized myself and my family. Ever since, I've never dared to walk in the street of D.C. at night, ever, and my family was extremely worried. So, Mr. President, thank you so much for what you're doing right now.
Thank you, Iris, for being honest.
It's really stunning, considering her colleagues in the White House Correspondents Association and the networks that they all work for have spent the last 2 weeks trying to convince Iris that there isn't a crime problem in D.C. and there's no need for the president to crack down and increase law enforcement at the federal level.
her colleagues should be ashamed of themselves. This is a woman who is trying to do business and go about her life in Washington, D.C., like so many of us. And it's terrifying. I tweeted out that someone was complaining about soldiers being at Union Station. And I tweeted out that I have been yelled at and chased and screamed at in that very location. And the idea that people are upset that law enforcement and law and order is returning to Washington is just so... It's so degrading, and it's just so demoralizing. I really admire this woman for speaking up. And again, her colleagues, they should be ashamed of themselves for gaslighting and for suggesting that reporting on this issue fairly is inappropriate, because it's not. We need to hear these stories.
That's right. She was robbed, she was punched, she was pistol whipped. She's a White House reporter, and she's had to sit there and, frankly, be re-victimized. Yep. By members of the media and by Democrats and politicians who, again, Trump's jujitsu here. It's amazing, his instincts, because he is. If you had told me 10 years ago when he came down that escalator that a decade from now Donald Trump will actually get Democrats and the media in this town to stand by the status quo of murder, rape, carjackings, and mayhem. And just because they hate Trump so much, they're on the side of murders. They can't even say, yes, this is a good thing. It is remarkable, but this is where we are. And yes, good for Iris Tao. And I'm glad that she feels some peace now, that she sees increased law enforcement on the streets of our fair city. It's 8:52.